you had early adopters, manufacturers that started looking at the regulations early. We're trying to fit 10 pounds of sugar into a 5-pound bag. Students are excited. Oh my gosh, this is the latest tech. It's got a turbine in it.
There's a question that follows a lot of pilots around, especially the ones that have been flying for a while. What if the airplane could just do more? More speed, more payload, a turbine engine maybe, retractable gear, the kind of performance that used to live in a completely different category and a completely different price range. For years, the rules kept a ceiling on all of that, and some really capable aircraft had to live inside of a box that was maybe a little too small for them. That's changing. It's called MOSAIC, and some people are already calling it Sport Pilot 2.0. It's a rulemaking that could reshape light sport aviation in ways the industry hasn't seen since the original Sport Pilot rule dropped back in 2004. Today, I'm sitting down with Trey Murdaugh, head of TL Sport Aircraft, whose lineup includes some of the most capable light sport designs flying right now: the Sirius, the Stream, the Sparker, and something new for backcountry pilots that we'll get into. Coming in from a hangar somewhere near the flight line, this is the Future in Flight podcast. Let's talk about one of my favorite things, and that is affordable aviation. New change on the horizon. They call it Sport Pilot 2.0. It's got a great acronym. We brought in a guy who's going to tell us a little bit about his understanding of MOSAIC, a guy who's out there. He's in the field of light sports. Trey Murdaugh, he's head of TL Sport. You know him. You've seen his aircraft. You've seen the Sirius, the Sparker, the new backcountry. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Trey, thanks for joining us on the Future in Flight podcast. Talk a little bit about what MOSAIC is. Is it going to be Sport Pilot 2.0? What are we going to see?
Shawn, well, thank you for having me on. I'm really glad to be here today and talk about the subject, MOSAIC or Sport Pilot 2.0. What that's going to entail is we're all trying to learn here as the manufacturers and customers, all trying to understand this new designation, we'll call it, and what that means for us and for the market at large.
What is MOSAIC exactly? Let's start right there at the beginning.
Okay, so I'm sure as many of your viewers know that I think the biggest or the hottest topic with MOSAIC, as it was with LSA at the start, is the ability to fly the aircraft with a sport license, which does not require the traditional medical. So you have a large population of pilots that have chosen to just get a sport license because they may not want to go all the way up the chain, get a private license or commercial license. They want to go fly VFR, go out and fly for enjoyment, not for commercial use. There were quite a few pilots that wanted that at the onset of LSA, and then also pilots that are aging out a little bit that may potentially lose the medical but still have the ability to fly. They have had an interest in LSA since it was first introduced. But there have been limitations to SLSA. I know that there were a lot of studies that were done early on. Everybody was trying to figure out, hey, is this new standard or this compliance or this new category, is it safer than GA as opposed to certified aircraft? What does that look like? And trying to collect the data over several decades to try to understand where are we? Did we progress? Has safety improved? Can we modify that? Can we expand the limits that we had with a special light sport? And that's what MOSAIC is. It's essentially, in simple terms, it's an expansion of the special light sport or the light sport aircraft, that category and the standards that we have had for, like I said, the past 2 decades.
For people that may not have been around when Sport Pilot first came out, is that this already exists. You can fly Sport Pilot right now, so that we're building on something. This is an evolution of something. Tell us a little bit about what came first. Give us a 30,000-foot view, if you will, of Sport Pilot, the Sport Pilot 1, and then we'll transition into what they're calling Sport Pilot 2.0, this MOSAIC ruling.
Okay. So in simple terms of what came first was LSA. I think it was introduced, you may have to correct me if I'm wrong here, I think it was introduced in 04, 05. You had early adopters, manufacturers that started looking at the regulations early, that started to work on their compliance and their standards that were through ASTM. And they were early adopters, and I think Vector, TL Ultralight, which is us at TL Sport Aircraft, they were an early adopter with the Sting. And you had other companies that put their wares out there in the U.S. to fulfill this opening, this new market. And it did very well. I think a lot of those folks or pilots went to that initially because of the exemption that you got with the medical and that you could fly with a sport license. I think what we found overall is that a lot of pilots didn't stop there. I don't think there were as many new pilots coming in that went just for a sport license. I think most of them either had a private or higher, and they purchased an SLSA for the freedom or the advantages that gave them. But there were some that came in and of course and stopped at sport pilot. But I don't think as many as statistically, I don't think the numbers were as high as they had originally. So we've had that, as I was saying, for the past few decades. Limitations that many of you know, it was capped at 1,320 pounds, slightly higher above 1,400. Amphibians. So you had the gross weight limitation, you had the propeller, engine power, seat limitations. Many of these things which have been up against scrutiny over the past couple decades of like, hey, where does this put us in safety? So what can we expand upon? And that largely, that push to come up with a better product or a more capable aircraft is how we've now arrived at MOSAIC. And let's say over the last 6 or 7 years, if manufacturers have tried to understand what that would look like with ASTM and push to expand this category, I think as a whole, from a manufacturing standpoint, we have gotten what we wanted and more. I think from when I'm looking at the new standards, which we can go into a little bit without getting too much in the weeds, is increased weight, which was a big one, increased power, increased seats. Now we can have constant speed propellers. We can have retracts. We can even have turbines. So, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and we cover some of that with our product line and how we're incorporating that technology into our designs. Imagine that. I mean, so we've, and the other big one we'll talk about is increased stall speed. That allow us. That was the big determinant, and still is the big determining factor for what aircraft will make it into the category. So.
Yeah, that's it. Stall speed, you hit the nail right on the head, becomes the determining factor. No longer is it that weight limit. Now we're limited by stall speed, which becomes a performance thing. That allows me to use the aircraft a little bit more and get a little bit more capability out of that aircraft. As an end user, it just sounds to me like this kind of is a refreshing little bit of coat of paint on something that was existing, that was great.
So I think we're all positioning ourselves to try and figure that out currently. That is a big question. All of us looking to say, okay, is the market going to expand? Will there be a new pilots, a new type of pilot that will come into the market because of all the new capabilities of the aircraft? I think what I was going to touch upon, one of the big things is looking at Sport Pilot 1.0, let's say, special light sport aircraft. It's like, how did we arrive there? How did we determine a gross weight limit of 1,320 pounds? What was the math? What were the metrics? So, because it was done under the guise of safety. So if that's the case, and we're trying to create a product that is safer, why those specific limitations? You have manufacturers around the world, especially in Europe, that are creating very high-end aircraft, composite designs, metal designs that are cutting edge. They're more aerodynamic, they're more efficient. They're using Rotax engines and other power plants that are, at the time, let's say 30 years ago, were fringe. Rotax is now mainstream. But you have these new designs that are pushing the envelope in a good direction, giving us products that are less expensive and more efficient. But you have these limitations that were created, such as 1320 gross, and manufacturers that can build a product that is capable of so much more. But is been shown to be a safe product, and most of them, like our product, the TL sport aircraft, we have ballistic parachutes. It's fantastic. So you have aircraft that are safer, easier to pilot, less encumbrances, but you're capped. So we're trying to fit 10 pounds of sugar into a 5-pound bag, and you have a product that is capable of so much more, but you're capped. So what happens because of that is you have products that are made in the effort to conserve on weight are now not as robust as they could be. Because you've got a plane that has great speed, great efficiency, it's light, but if we could just beef this up or do any number of ideas or implement new technology, and it's going to weigh too much. So here we are with MOSAIC, and some of the things that is allowing us, the biggest is the weight that we're touching on here that will allow us to improve safety, and because we can build a better product, we can build a stronger product.
So we've mentioned a lot about safety, and that's such a key term in aviation. One way or the other, we want to make sure that whatever moves we're making are in the interest of safety. And it sounds like MOSAIC is kind of allowing the manufacturers to really express themselves and get very creative, all within these great safety margins. So MOSAIC is seemingly moving us in the right direction. Now, of course, it's important to mention that this is not yet set in stone, that MOSAIC is still kind of fluid, even though we're coming up against some tight guidelines where we have to have these key metrics in. Things can change. So there always is that kind of possibility. How are you looking at that potential for change and that uncertainty as a business?
Well, I think you're touching upon if I understand your question correctly, it's just the regulations.
How are you looking at because if we had certainty, everybody would rush in. I say, man, I've got my product. We're ready to go. But the fact is something could change. And how are you looking at that? How does that factor into your business?
Yeah, it could change, but there's two factors here, in my opinion. I mean, you've got uncertainty is one of them. But even if you had certainty in the standards, not all companies are able to comply, because there's a lot to the standards that are coming out. It just as it was with SLSA, there's a lot of testing and testing standards and infrastructure or design in the aircraft that must meet compliance, that must meet these new standards. So some folks will not be able to do that. It's just not practical. And that's if it was certain. To add complexity to that, yes, we're all trying to understand the new standard. We're all trying to understand the new rules that are coming out. Okay, what do we need to do differently with the existing designs that we've had for the past few decades? Some of them for the past few decades. So it can be confusing, but I know TL Sport Aircraft and the other manufacturers as a whole are actively trying to figure that out so that we can build that product that we have the means to do. If we can just make sure that we're checking the boxes.
Let's take a quick break from this conversation to tell you about one of our wonderful show supporters. This episode is brought to you by TL Sport Aircraft. Whether you're chasing backcountry strips in the serious backcountry, cruising at 175 knots in the Sparker, or training the next generation of pilots, TL Sport Aircraft has an aircraft built for your mission. Check crafted, MOSAIC ready, and backed by more than 35 years of quality production. These are the aircraft that are redefining sport aviation. Come find them at Sun & Fun Display Area LD12 or explore the full lineup at tlsportaircraft.com. That's tlsportaircraft.com. And now, back to the conversation.
A very, very exciting time. And all this, of course, is going to the end user, the pilot, somebody who's coming in, whether they be a long-time pilot, they're looking for additional performance. Maybe they're looking for a turbine engine, or they want to retracts, complex, aircraft. Or we're looking at somebody just coming into aviation, starting out with something that is really going to fit their mission. And you look at these light sports, and it seems like we're seeing a little bit more of the flight schools going to light sports. How could MOSAIC affect the flight training and the amount of light sports that we see and the amount of people going into light sport aviation that way?
I feel like we have two parts to the question. One is how it applies to the market. If I can, why don't I go over like a brief assessment for those that are still learning about MOSAIC, and then we'll talk about how it applies to the products, like what we're actually able to do with our aircraft. So special light sport aircraft, when it's first introduced and is held since for the last 2 decades, was limited to the 1320 pounds we discussed, 2 seats, 45 knots, stall limitation, dirty. You had a maximum speed of 120 knots, single engine with a fixed pitch propeller and fixed landing gear. That's the quick and dirty of it. Those are the basic guidelines from an aircraft standpoint. MOSAIC, and this is where I had said earlier, we got a lot of what we wanted and more. I mean, it's fantastic what it allows us to do now with the products and the technologies that we can put in there. We no longer have a 2-seat limit. Now we have up to 4 seats. There is no prescribed maximum weight. I get that. No prescribed maximum weight. And as you were saying earlier, the new metric will be the stall speed. That will be the limiting factor that will, in essence, control the design of the aircraft, because that controls your wing, your speed. You can only have so much weight and stall at this limit, which is now 61 knots. So you have two, and some of this may be in flux, but right now we have 61 knots clean. And we have I believe it's a 59 knot clean limitation for those that want to fly the aircraft with a sport license. And so this can be a little confusing, and maybe you can touch on that in a minute. But you've got two limitations here. Manufacturers can produce a MOSAIC aircraft. In order to be MOSAIC, it must meet that 61 knot clean speed. But in order to fly the aircraft with a sport license without a medical, I believe it is 59 knots. And we'll see where that comes out here in the next month or two. You don't have a maximum airspeed anymore, and you're not limited to a single engine. I believe they're looking at twins. And not just twin engines, what we'll touch on in a minute, which is turbines. They will allow turbine engines to be installed in these aircraft and flown, and that is going to be huge for the flight school, the training market. As well, with the increased power in the engines, they're allowing a fixed, not just a fixed pitch, as they did in SLSA, but a constant speed. And they will allow retracts, which is huge. So I think that's just kind of a brief synopsis of the changes that are in play here. Those are the big points to go over with MOSAIC. Now, because of these changes, now we can add, because we have higher weight, so we have these designs, many of them that were capable of increased weight, that could carry another 200 to 300 pounds of payload, can now do that. But if you follow the new standards and the testing to show that, you can access the additional performance of these aircraft. And with turbines, for example, now we can actually put a turboprop in the plane, and there are certain advantages to that. Reliability. One, it's not a cheap option, but now you have the reliability of a turbine, which never would have been possible before. Aircraft that can, for example, our Sparker, the TL Sport aircraft, the Sparker and the Stream, they're capable of speeds up to 180 knots, which we were limited with before. Due to the retracts. So that is a great advantage. So as many of the viewers may know, were able to use SLSA aircraft in a commercial setting, commercial application. So you can use it currently in a school. Again, due to that 1320 limitation, it's not always practical with a lot of the designs that we have to be able to fit an examiner and full fuel into these aircraft. You typically going above your gross, and that has been a big limiting factor. So now that is out the window, and we're changing that. Now we can have, aircraft, the same designs that can carry another 200 to 300 pounds. For example, our Sirius aircraft, excellent trainer. It's very stable at slow speeds. It's like a Cessna in that for a flight school that's looking for a stable design. That's easy to fly and train pilots and to train these students. It's great, but it was, because of the limitation, it wasn't practical. You could put two pilots in it, but you can't put full fuel, for example. And now we can improve upon that. So you have our design and others that flight schools can look at a fraction of the cost of the traditional GA market. A third less, half the price of the aircraft that they have typically been using for the last 40, 50, 60 years. So now you have new aircraft coming out, lower maintenance costs, because these aircraft, they're new. They have very efficient engines, such as the Rotax. They're burning half the fuel. So the combination is a win-win for most programs out there. Is they now get to save money. They have less downtime. The aircraft are not in maintenance as much. And so they spend more time in the air. They're able to get more students through. You can see the advantages here, let alone the technology. Back to the turbine. So imagine a good example of this is, again, our Sparker, the retract, that's our high performance model, or our Sirius. You have an aircraft that you can now put a turbine in for about $450,000. Wow. So for a flight school, a turbine for $450,000. So now you've got this product that students are excited about. This, like, oh my gosh, this is the latest tech. It's got a turbine in it, and you can accrue the hours there at a fraction of the cost that we had before.
Talk a little bit about your TL Sport models. I know we talked about this series just a little bit, but get into some of these models again.
So a brief history on TL Sport aircraft. Our aircraft are manufactured in the Czech Republic under the manufacturer TL Ultralight. We trade under the name of TL Sport aircraft in the U.S. due to the designation of Ultralight. That's an LSA designation for the European market. And our company came into existence actually in 1989. We've built over 2,000 aircraft that are flying around the world. We entered the market here in the U.S. in a big way with the onset of special light sport with the Sting. Sting has gone through several iterations. We're now at the Sting S. There's over 500 of these aircraft that have been produced. In 2010, we introduced the Sirius, the high wing, which was it kind of looked like a Cessna in its, it looks like a Cessna, but a sleeker Cessna. It's as wide as a 172. It has two seats, but it's as wide as a 172. And this aircraft has a tapered wing, very stable. We built upon these two designs and introduced in 2015 our high-performance model, the Stream. Now, the Stream and the new Sparker introduced about 3 years ago in 2022 are sister aircraft, the same wing and tail platform. One is a tandem, the Stream is a tandem, and the Sparker is a side-by-side. Now, but these two aircraft are where we really started to depart from the traditional light sport aircraft. They're retracts. You can get them up to 160 horsepower. They're capable of up to 175, 180 knot speeds. You can dial this plane back with a Rotax in it and burn 4 gallons an hour and still go about 130 knots. So just incredible efficiency, incredible performance. They're a blast to fly. They're agile, they're fast, and they're very well balanced. So as a whole, TL did very well, built upon these designs, improved upon them, but we, again, back to our discussion with MOSAIC, have had these limitations, and now the sky is the limit. I use the pun, okay? But now all of our designs can, the high performance designs specifically can now meet and be flown under this new rule, the MOSAIC rule. So to speak a little more, for example, of aircraft and how they are changing, our Sirius platform, which is great for the flight schools. We were capped at 120. Now we have this. For example, we just came out with a Rotax 916, the turbo in the Sirius. This plane that was capped at 120. Well, guess what? When you put 160 horses in it, it will do over 150 knots true airspeed above 10,000 feet. Okay, well, that's great. Well, we didn't have that option before, but the plane is capable of doing that. So you have a small, a plane that looks like a Cessna, super stable for a flight school, and you can say, hey, well, guess what? You can do 150 knots with this plane. You can go up to 18,000 feet. You can train your students all the way up the line, all of our aircraft, full glass, which is what we're talking about with these new designs. They're the latest, not only they're new, but they have the latest tech. You can go 150 plus knots true above 10,000 feet. You can pull this thing back to 60 to 70% power and hang there for time building for students and burn 4 gallons an hour. You can't beat that. These are all the things that are now possible with the increased performance, the increased power. And you have up to a 150-pound useful load in this aircraft. So you can easily put an examiner, a student, and full fuel and bags without any limitation. And that's the advantage here. That's what's occurring. And that's why this is so exciting for the manufacturers. It's so exciting for us and for other manufacturers.
It's just like the machines can breathe. You can look at your aircraft. They just scream performance. Sport Pilot 1 kind of stripped performance in the name of safety. All great aircraft, very, very safe performance with SLSA, but now aircraft that can really achieve their potential.
Us and other manufacturers had products that were capable of so much more, and we're trying to fit them into this shoebox that was really limiting.
Folks want to go look at these models. Do you have some pictures on the web? Can we check out the website?
Yes, you can find us at tlsportaircraft.com. We have our product line there. For example, the new Sirius with the 916 turbo, you'll be able to find the stats and the information on those products. We are very excited about Sun and Fun 2026. We are sponsoring the Stoll Invitational this year because we're expanding our product line. We introduced the new tail dragger, which is our Sirius backcountry for Stoll pilots, for folks that want to land out in the out in the outback or the backcountry, you'll find that aircraft out there at the Stoll Base Camp and at the grass strip that's in Paradise City, where we will be flying that aircraft in the manufacturer's demo and have it out on display during the Stoll Invitational. Now, as well, we will be in our large display area. It is near the FAA building at the show, and we will have our other aircraft, the new Sirius, the Tri-Gear Sirius with the 916 turbo that we're very excited about. Share the numbers and the performance that we're getting with that plane, as well as the Stream and a Sparker on display.
Man, I love that phrase Trey used, fitting 10 pounds of sugar into a 5-pound bag. That's exactly what it's felt like for manufacturers who have been building world-class aircraft and watching them bump up against a weight limit that was never quite built for what they were capable of. MOSAIC changes all that, and if you want to see it up close, in person, on the ground, in the air, TL Sport Aircraft is going to be at Sun & Fun 2026. You'll find them at display area LD12, right near the FAA building. They'll have the Sirius with the 916 turbo, the Stream, the Sparker, and the brand new Sirius Backcountry will be out at Paradise City as part of the Stoll Invitational, which TL Sport Aircraft is proudly sponsoring this year. If you can't make it to Lakeland, head over to tlsportaircraft.com. Check out the full lineup, the performance numbers, and everything else they've got coming. And hey, if this episode got you fired up about where light sport aviation is headed, do us a favor. Subscribe to the Future in Flight podcast wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It genuinely helps more people find the show. Until next time, we'll see you out there and up there.